Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday, the 21st of April. I am Bosin Omofaye, and I welcome my panel to the show this morning. Joshua Deby, Head of Banking Analysis at Vertiba Capital Management in Lagos, Nigeria, and Ali Kansaju, the founder and CEO at Rich Frontiers Management in Nairobi. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming on the show this morning. Let's take a quick run through the five equities markets across the continent that we cover on a daily basis. Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Egyptian, Top 30 and Kenya market were in the green. Ivory Coast and Egypt got a bigger chunk of the day. South Africa was down 1.85%. The rand also softened on Wednesday. Let's look at the East Africa, where Ali will give us an update on this 1% minimum tax between the court and the Kenya Revenue Authority. What was the latest we got last night was that the KRA is appealing the court order, which was gotten earlier in the day on Tuesday. And Nairobi Securities Exchange is gotten the EGM Securities offering derivatives on its platform. Good news from Bamburi, there will be dividend for shareholders despite 5% decline in revenue for full year 2020. Family Bank is redeeming 2.018 billion shillings corporate notes, bond notes. And Uganda's Chadian is doing $3.6 million in equity financing. And Ethiopia is moving forward with digital payments, of course, with Visa, one of the world's largest card issuer, and Moneta Technologies putting hands together to support digital payments in the Horn of Africa. Ali, let's get the latest first on the KRA. What's this minimum tax brouhaha all about? Who is likely to win?
So, first of all, this came out of left field a little bit. The government introduced as one of its tax-raising measures tax on turnover for companies with turnover below $500,000 or thereabouts. And this tax will be levied irrespective of profits or losses at a level of 1%. It was, I think, the impulse behind it was to bring more people into the tax bracket, but clearly at a time when the economy is soft, when lots of small and medium-sized enterprises have been doing very poorly and just in a fight for survival, it was universally disliked. There was an appeal to the court, and the court has suspended it. The KRA is appealing. The judge in that court case made a very compelling final analysis where he said, look, you're just simply going to cripple businesses which are already close to the abyss. Personally, I think it's a retrograde step by the Kenya Revenue Authority. I hope that they revisit the situation. And the concern is that the tax authority is simply not doing any scenario analysis and thinking about what the consequences of these taxes might be. We've seen that before with the Robin Hood tax, which was then reversed. So everybody is keen to see how this turns out. The KRA is maintaining its position and appealing the decision by the court. EGM Securities offer derivatives trading. At the moment, the derivatives trading portion at the stock exchange is very nascent, but I think this is a significant statement. EGM Securities out of owned by a Dubai-based entity looking to enter into the derivatives market. I think it's a positive step for the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Bamburi Cement, which is one of our, which is in fact the largest cement company here in Kenya, reported full year earnings per share up sharply to 2 shillings and 89 cents from 1 shilling and 74 cents previously. Investors will like the fact that they're having previously skipped a dividend, they're paying a 3 shilling dividend, so they're paying practically 110% of the earnings per share, but that's because they skipped it last year and have some cash on hand. Revenue was down, as you said, by a couple of billion shillings, about 5%. But I think this really speaks to the cost-cutting measures they've undertaken. which they'd undertaken in the previous year. And I think investors will be quietly quite satisfied with those results. Finally, your story about Ethiopia, Moneta Tech, and Visa partnering to support digital payments is an interesting development. Safaricom are obviously hoping to get the M-Pesa platform in there, which doesn't seem as happening at the moment. And Visa, of course, has made a very big push into the African digital payments space, has been taking stakes in, took a stake, I think, in Airtel Money recently. It's taken stakes in a number of fintechs and is being very aggressive. And obviously is excited by this market opportunity in Ethiopia, which is largely a greenfield one with over 110 million people, a significant blue sky opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Ali. Let me just ask Joshua for just about a minute on the Vetiva Capital is one of the largest firms in Nigeria in derivatives trading, offering their own products in the market. Joshua, what's any latest on how the derivatives market is going in Nigeria with what the NSE, now NGX, is working on introducing, doing a whole lot more with derivatives, and the SEC setting up new regulations?
Well, so what I can say about that is, obviously that market is still very much in the early stages. I don't think that a significant number of Nigerian investors really understand derivatives or how to really operate in that space. So there will definitely have to be a lot more of information being given out to investors on how they can take advantage of, you know, the derivatives market and the futures market and things like that. But definitely within the next few months, and you know, as time passes, we'll start to see a little bit more movement in that space. I think, like you said, Vetiva is very much interested in, you know, exploring those opportunities, and a lot of big firms are also, you know, pushing for that. The SEC and the NGX, the Nigerian Exchange, have definitely made some strides, but there's still quite a lot to do with regards to sensitizing investors and also, you know, opening up that market so that people understand what exactly it is they're getting into and how they can go about deriving value or making, you know, any kind of significant investments in that space. But I think definitely a lot more progress will be made this year, and we might start to see a more mature market as time goes on. But definitely it's the problem of information at this point, that we're not really at the same level as a lot more mature derivatives markets, but that will come with time and with, you know, a lot more information being published and being, you know, put out by the authorities and by companies like Vetiva and the like, selling it to investors, selling it to people to bring in their money and to take advantage of it.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Let's come across to West Africa, where the pretty ugly news yesterday evening was the death of the Chadian president, Deby. Whatever is going on in N'Djamena right now is still political and unfolding overnight. Some unconfirmed news about some of the other stories taking place. What would this mean for the Chadian economy and the market, a country that's been riddled with insurgency and rebels over the past years, that's kept the president even at the front line of this fight is anyone's guess. So this is all taking it all up the whole reason the game are between Chad, Mali, northern part of Nigeria, and a few other countries within that region. Within the Nigerian market, good news yesterday that Vorian Corelli is set to float 20 billion exchange-traded notes on the Lagos Commodity Exchange. The initial approval is there. Now they are ready to make the full listing in the next couple of weeks. We spoke with some of the promoters early today. Axa Mansard is one of Nigeria's largest insurer, posting 56% profit after tax. Chams PLC, who's an ICT big name within the Nigerian market, the new chief financial officer appointed, Patricia Duru, is a woman. Give woman in charge of the money, and you can go to bed. And Ghana is having a handshake with Zimbabwe's Mangwe mobile money operator, buying 51% by ZPay. And the Central Bank for French-speaking West Africa, known as the BCL, has injected 4.866 billion, thereabout, CFA funds into the UMO economy over the past 1 year as part of simulating and keeping the UMO economies up and running. Ali, let's get your sense very quickly with the developments in Chad. What are you making of it from a political point of view?
Well, I mean, there's so many dynamics to that announcement. Of course, President Deby had just secured his 6th election victory at the polls. There were a lot of dispute about that. Then he goes up to the front line. This is the report we get, and loses his life there. And I think there are a bunch of things that we got to consider. First of all, there is a constitution in Chad, and the arrangement that the army have provided is extra constitutional. There is a provision for a change of power that does not involve the army taking power. Of course, Idris Deby was in power for nearly 30 years, was a scion of President Gaddafi's Academy for Revolution. He has been at the center of the fight in the Sahel against Islamic extremism. He's been well supported by Western countries. So a lot will depend, I think, also on the folks at the Élysée Palace, Emmanuel Macron and others, as to how they're going to deal with the situation. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's the way Francophone Africa works. You know, he has a big say in the matter. Chad, of course, is, economically speaking, has gone to the DSSI program. They do produce oil, but I also saw some reports from a guy called Dino Matani, and he had some footage of these rebels, and they looked incredibly well provisioned and seemed to be headed in the direction of the capital. So I think we're going to be watching some very fast-moving events unfold over the next few days. It's difficult to predict exactly what will happen. And I also saw overnight we had some shooting between another brother of the current, the fellow that they put in front of the son. So two brothers also fighting each other. So it has huge ramifications for the Sahel, the counterterrorism effort there. You know, he's one of the few leaders you'll find who went to the front line, and really he did lead the fight. We might disagree with him in many things, but he did lead the fight against Islamic extremism, and it's difficult to see somebody who can do that in the same manner.
Interesting, these developments, Ali. I think it's going to keep unraveling how for the president and the head of the government to be at the front line, and for him to get killed as a general in the middle of his other generals remains something that perhaps days and weeks and months ahead will be able to get some hands on that, because it's not such a very easy thing to get to the head of state or the president of a country on the front line. But again, there's a whole lot of stories, because he wouldn't have gone alone. He will have some of the best protection at the forefront where he was. So for him to get killed, how many other officers got killed with him, or whatever happened, is anyone's story. Joshua Deby, you have anything to say on these political developments in Chad? What are you thinking?
Well, first of all, I think it's quite strange for a 74-year-old man, no matter whether you're the head of the military or not, to be at the front lines of any war. Surely at that stage you have transitioned into more of a strategic, commanding role. There's really no need for you to be in a war zone at that age. And as the head of a country like Chad, I just found the entire situation quite strange, to be very, very honest. I'm not very conversant with Chad's, military hierarchy, but I would imagine that there would be other generals and other commanders underneath him that could carry out his plans and his actions for him while he sits and strategically plans, against these rebels. Obviously, we know that there's no way that we would ever see, President Buhari, for example, in military fatigues on the front line in Maiduguri for whatever reason. Just, unfathomable. I don't think that is something that, should be replicated, can be replicated anywhere else really on the continent for any reason. Overall, I think, yeah, that's it.
Just a quick one on the Varian Corelli Lagos Commodity Exchange, 20 billion. Do you think we are moving the needle as far as commodity exchange is concerned?
Well, when you say moving the needle, obviously 30 billion is a good start. It depends now. Obviously, commodities is very different from, you know, your stocks, really, but there are definitely, there's need for a lot of capital injection into that space. If we can continue to see consistent investment at that level, then definitely we would see progress being made with regards to commodities. Obviously, we have a few commodities exchanges, and you know they are specialized in different areas and different commodities. So, you know, Abuja and Lagos, and we've seen quite a bit of investment, and they're pushing hard to try and get people sensitized towards, you know, investing in commodities as an alternative to your stocks and your bonds. But I think definitely 30 billion is a good start. As time goes on, if we're able to see more going into that, it would help a lot, because obviously commodities give you a little bit different kind of security with regards to, you know, production and supply of these really essential resources, especially, you know, in the agricultural and the natural, this mineral space.
Interesting. Let's move to Southern Africa, where I'm sure Ali is musing over Zimbabwe's finance minister's optimism that he will grow the economy 7.4%. He seems to be on a different page or chapter in the economic book with the President Mwanagagwa. The IMF forecast about 3.1%. Tule believes it can do 100% above that. Well, we would like to see that happen. I would like to see Zimbabwe get off its knees and start walking. Fitch booking Angola's growth at 1.7% this year. That's the latest. What's going on with Absa, by the way, Ali, as far as this appointment of an interim group CEO is concerned in SA?
Yes, thank you. Let me start with Zimbabwe. As you said, President Mwanagagwa has been more skeptical about the growth rate that his finance minister is projecting. As you said, the IMF is around 3%. I too would like to see Zimbabwe rebound, but I suspect we're going to be more in the range of the IMF prediction. Simply because, I appreciate the farm economy is such a big portion of the Zimbabwean economy, but at the same time, we know that there are major dislocations, particularly in the mining sector, where you have a lot of, reported off-the-books transactions and so forth. But overall, I think what we can say is it's going to be a significantly better year for Zimbabwe. I really hope they also do the reforms around the currency and so forth in order to give this an extra boost. Absa, as you correctly said, seemed to have fallen out. The board has diverged from its previous chief executive officer. This announcement was carried yesterday. It's interesting. We don't know exactly where the divergence has happened, but they seem to have had two different approaches to what they thought the opportunity was. I think we have Absa here in Kenya. They've got a great African footprint. I think by releasing themselves from the control of London gave them a lot more freedom. And overall, I think there's a good story to unfold within that Absa network, and you've got behind it all, you've got the capital markets of South Africa to dig into to grow your Pan-African business. Fitch estimating Angola at 1.7% growth this year. This would snap 5 years of contraction if that occurs. Obviously, I think that's predicated on a higher oil price. But also, we've had recent announcements about privatizations, offloading of state-owned enterprises. They're selling off a couple of banks at the moment as we speak. One will go through the Luanda Stock Exchange. So I think, there's quite an interesting story developing in Angola where they're finally getting on top of their brief. And I think if they can excite investors globally about some of these opportunities, then you could see the currency start to improve. You could see foreign money coming into that market. And then I do think Fitch probably is about right. And there's a lot of potential in that economy. It's not just an oil and gas economy. Once upon a time, they were the biggest producers of bananas. So a lot of potential over there. And I hope that the new president, who's not so new anymore, gets going. I particularly like what the finance minister, the lady, is trying to do. And they're also looking to offload 30% of Sonangol at some point. That will be interesting as well. Celsi, sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead with Celsi. I'm trying to find out when will Celsi be able to get off. It looks like it's been pushed, retained down there by MTN, the size, the big.
I think this has been a perennial problem for Celsi. I think MTN is a very fierce competitor. And Celsi has never really found its niche, and that's reflected in these numbers.
Yeah, Celsi is stuck between MTN and Telkom, and so the other heavyweights is just getting crushed there, as it were. Thank you. Joshua, let me ask you very quickly about this Zimbabwe story about the finance minister talking about 7.4% GDP growth. The president says, well, I think it should be lower. Is this a realistic scenario, by the way, in which the president and the minister of finance are not on the same page?
Well, I mean, obviously, the minister of finance, you would think, would have, all the data at hand and all the information to know that that is, an accurate portrayal. But maybe the president just thinks that that's a bit too bullish. I mean, 7.4% sounds like a whole, a hell of a lot of growth. If you want to talk about, agricultural output, if that's the primary driver of all of that growth, then I'd have to say they're, producing quite a lot of product and selling it on the international market at a huge scale. But if the finance minister believes that, then hopefully they have the data to back that. I say go with what the finance minister is saying.
Is this a kind of healthy conversation you like to see within the Nigerian space and in other countries where the central bank can differ from the president and openly say so, or the minister of finance differ with the president?
Absolutely. First of all, the CBN or every central bank really should be separate from the federal government. They are meant to act and operate independently. The central government's primary objective or primary function is to control, money and money supply and ensure that inflation stays within an acceptable band. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we sort of abandoned that to some extent, and we have seen, the CBN moving from just a regulator to almost like the bank of the federal government in a lot of ways, and that really should not be the case. But there should be some healthy discourse and some disagreement within government, because that's the way you come to a consensus, that's the way you come to agreements, and that's the way you find ways to progress. Unfortunately, I think we've just seen a bit of a rubber stamp CBN and a bit of a rubber stamp Ministry of Finance for the past 5 years or so, and that really should not be the case, because we've just slipped further and further away from our objectives, which is low inflation, high growth, low unemployment. All of these things are not happening. We're going in the wrong direction, and that's because of the rubber stamp that they're giving to the federal government.
I agree. I think I agree with you. I think it makes it a whole lot more interesting to have a divergent view, so that we can begin to test waters as to what numbers the party is talking to, and investors can get a better sense of things rather than this head scenario that we have. But let's just touch on North Africa, because I have just one or two headlines there in terms of the Fitch cutting the Egypt's real GDP growth outlook to 2.9% for full year 2020-2021. Ali, that's the story I would want you to touch on just to wrap it up this morning.
Yes, I mean, I was taken up, I don't know what's driving that outcome on Fitch to 2.9%. I'm reasonably bullish about Egypt. I think it'll have a 3 handle. For me, the main issue is really food prices, and that's the big concern for me. Otherwise, I see the Egyptian market, well-behaved currency, a lot of foreign direct investment continuing to come in, a lot of support coming out of the UAE, and a sort of Mediterranean economy, which seems to be gaining momentum, in which Egypt is front and center. So, a bit taken aback by that. I remain resolutely bullish about Egypt, and I particularly like the treasury bill trade, carry trade, with the currency, as far as I'm concerned, being relatively well maintained.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Alec and Sacho.
Thank you.
We appreciate your views this morning on the show, the CEO and founder at Reach Frontiers Management. And of course, Joshua Deby, thank you so much for your time as Head of Banking Analysis at Vertical Capital Management based in Lagos, Nigeria. See you again tomorrow, everyone. Bye for now.